Good evening, everybody. We are about to have a very exciting moment where we close the glass door. I know, it's all theatrics here at the Fine Arts Work Center. So if everyone can just clear the space underneath that door, there you go. Well, welcome, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Fine Arts Work Center and our first FAWC Friday of the 24-25 season. Emerson is clapping, so I'm gonna start. A big round of applause. Also, this is our welcome to our new fellows in residence who come from all over the world, all over the United States, and are here with us through April. So please, tonight, extend a big, warm Provincetown welcome to them as well. My name is Sharon Poley, and I'm the Executive Director here at the Fine Arts Work Center. My pronouns are she, her, hers. Here at FAWC, we support artistic freedom, we nurture creative connections, and we make possible artistic achievements that are important to the larger culture. It is so special to gather here tonight at a time our world needs creativity and community, and at a time as we're preparing to enter the cold, quiet months of the Provincetown off-season, when we celebrate the creativity and solitude that makes this place so special. From now until April, we'll be hosting Friday night events where we activate our whole campus with music and food and open studios, artist talks, readings, and more. And so we hope you'll come back frequently and often and be part of this creative community. Tonight, we have such a special night planned. First, I hope that everybody enjoyed Rosie's Cantina. I mean, Rosie's. Might be some of the last Rosies of the season. Kumarasamy, a past fellow of the Fine Arts Work Center, and visual artist Baseera. Following tonight's presentation, the two of them will be involved in a Q&A with the audience, so please save all of your great questions so we can have a really dynamic conversation. Then Akil will be signing books in the back of the room that are available to purchase, and Baseera will be activating the print shop together with Provincetown artist Vicky Tomeko, so we're super excited about that. Tonight, we're also celebrating the opening of an exhibition by our Stephen Pace artist in residence, Itty Newhouse, in the Hudson D. Walker Gallery. Itty's in the back. Congratulations, Itty. And lastly, a selection of our fellows have so generously agreed to open up their studios. And so afterward, any studio that has one of those colorful banners across the top is available for you to explore and to meet the artists. I want to take a moment to thank our partners who do so much to make our free community events possible, including independent local bookseller East End Books, who runs our bookshop. We do love independent booksellers. The National Endowment for the Arts, Mass Cultural Council, the Arts Foundation of Cape Cod, and the town of Provincetown are very generous supporters, institutional supporters of our work. And of course, so many of you in this room contribute to this very special place and make our work possible. So if you feel inspired to make a donation, your support directly underwrites all of the free programming that we're able to do. There's QR codes throughout the space that you can scan this holiday season to make a gift. So a few final housekeeping items before we dig in. There are restrooms and a water cooler down that hallway to your left. We have assisted listing devices for anyone who might need one. Just ask a FAWC staff member about that. We also have some cushions throughout the space and in the back of the room. Finally, little reminder, please turn off your cell phones. And with that, I am very pleased to introduce my somewhat new colleague, our new fellowship director, Terry Kihu. Woo! No pressure, Terry. Who's going to introduce our first guest of the night. Welcome, everyone.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming out. It's nice to see some familiar faces in the crowd. It helps. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Terry Q. I'm the Fellowship Director at the Fine Arts Work Center. My pronouns are he, him, his. Tonight, I have the great pleasure of introducing and welcome to the stage our two distinguished speakers for the evening, writer Akil Kumarasamy and visual artist Baseera Khan. Thank you both for accepting the invitation and for being here to share your work with our community. Akil Kumarasamy is an author and assistant professor in the Rutgers University Newark MFA Creative Writing Program and a 2024-2025 fellow at Harvard Radcliffe Institute. Dazzling, a genre-bending marvel, gorgeous prose, enthralling, an exemplar of contemporary fiction, a narrative triumph. These are just a few words that have been used to describe her narrative and published works. Her debut novel, Meet Us by the Roaring Sea, published in 2022 by Farrar, Straus and Giroux, was a New York Times Editor's Choice and shortlisted for the Ursula Le Guin Prize and Lambda Literary Award. Writing for the Star Tribune, Jonathan Russell Clark described the novel as a brazenly complex, labyrinthine, I didn't know that was a word, structured, deeply philosophical, thematically ambitious novel, a masterpiece that more than confirms the promise of half-gods. Akil's linked short story collection, Half Gods, was published in 2018, also by FSG, and was awarded the Bard Fiction Prize and the Story Prize Spotlight Award, and was a finalist for the PEN Robert Bingham Prize, and also named a New York Times Editor's Choice. Her work has appeared in Harper's Magazine, The Atlantic, American Short Fiction, Bomb, among others. She has received fellowships from the University of East Anglia, Yaddo, Caley's Berlin, the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, and the Fine Arts Work Center in Provincetown, where Akil was a fellow in 2016-2017. Welcome back, Akil. The stage is yours.
Terry's so tall, I lower the mic. Yeah, I think that's good, yeah. Maybe a little lower, maybe. Thank you. Yeah, that's good. I could just also hold it. Yeah, it should be fine. Yeah. I think it's fine. Or maybe not. Or maybe just hello. This mic is not prepared for someone this height. All right, thank you so much. Yay! Thank you so much, Terry, for that kind introduction, and everyone at the Fine Arts Work Center. It's been kind of really wonderful and also strange being back, because I was here 2016, 2017 when Trump got elected, and now it's like election week, so it's kind of bringing back a lot of memories. We could talk about that during the Q&A of like things that we did to manage the situation, which I don't think we did so well. There were a lot of like bonfires and just like purging in the ocean, like people just going in the middle of the night doing some sort of rituals, like cleansing rituals. But yeah, it's great being back. It's also just it's interesting because this fellowship came at such a really needed time in my writing process. So of like all the things that fellowships I've done, this one has had like the most impact on my like kind of, I guess, my writing practice. I think at the time I was working as like a data manager at like a 3D printing lab, and I still don't know what I did exactly. I like managed data, and I had like 3 bosses, and so I don't think anyone knew what I did exactly. I think at one point I almost forgot that I wrote. I remember going to like a Women Who Code meeting, and they were talking about staying up late at night and coding, and I was like, I wish I had something I was very passionate about. And then And then I was like, oh yes, I really love writing. How did I forget this? So, So Provincetown came as a kind of like affirmation, like, yes, you should write, and this is something that you do love. So it's been, yeah, it's wonderful coming back. So I thought I would just start reading from, so this book, Meet Us by the Roaring Sea, was actually not my first book that I wrote, but my writing samples from this book. And I didn't really change much of it. And I worked on this book and also stories from my last book. So I thought I would just start with the excerpt that I submitted here. That was kind of the beginning. So this book, it takes place in the near future with a female AI coder, and she's translating a manuscript from the 1990s and is also working on a kind of strange AI project. So the book alternates between this future world of New York City and the translated manuscript. So when I was here, I was working on the translated manuscript, but I didn't even know it was a translated manuscript. I didn't even know this book would take place in the future. So I was just writing into the known spaces, and specifically, this voice was really interesting to me, so I just followed it while I was here. And yes, this is also was my writing sample here. And it's, so it's, in this section, there's a group of kind of female medical students. They're living in the 1990s, and they're living at the edge of a war and during a drought. And they come up with this new kind of way of being called radical compassion. So I'll just start there. We were 18 the summer of the drought. The cow's milk tasted of water, and the harvest had shriveled to half-formed things. Onions the size of chicken eggs were pulled from the ground, and lentils the color of the sky, the same bright blue as the dye from the garment factory. At St. Mary's Hostel, we survived off boiled peanuts and rice porridge. The single meal was meant to last us the whole day. The hunger was a lesson in the human body. And on our first day of anatomy class, we all looked drained and hollowed out, like the skeleton hanging in the front of the room. 17 girl specimens. Alone for the first time in our lives, we walked from the hostel to the canteen, our backs hunched and arms tight across our chests. And the older girls would look at us wordlessly while passing. Their gaze, like the steady surface of a mirror, would feel them willing us to look, step closer, reveal what we did not even know of our true natures. Sitting side by side, the older girls ate with a patience we had yet to fully understand. They chewed on a single peanut for 20 minutes, moving their mouths so slowly, as though they were chanting. Sometimes they left their porridge outside the gates for a street dog, or they searched for the hungry before sundown, walking barefoot down the streets. To us, it seemed like they survived eating nothing at all. We had all come from different villages and cities across the state to the recently established medical college, only 29 kilometers from the island. Our parents were told we would get first-rate medical training because of the geography. How many first-year students were able to operate on patients? Our parents knew of the Civil War on the island, but with a distant recollection, much like their memory of the old epic poetry we shared. Written in the same tongue, when ancient kings ruled the land, and nothing as elemental as water divided dynasties. For them, these were like fables, old wives' tales, useless musings that brought only more hunger. We were mostly average students who scored high enough to enter medical school, but not enough for a government scholarship. With the opening of the medical college by the refugee camps, our parents prayed at the temple, the mosque, the church, thanking the Lord for the misfortune of others. As long as people suffered, we would be employed. When they spoke of the refugees, they expressed an oversaturated pity, their voices clouded with satisfaction. And before they could turn away, we saw the faint outline of a smile crossing their lips, as if they found a dark-edged pleasure in the image of us holding knives and needles, poking and prodding with our young, inexperienced hands. So I'll stop there for the translated manuscript. So some of the big questions I think I was asking in this book, which I don't think I realized until maybe later as I was figuring out the outside storyline, is how do we care about each other in this digital age? There's this concept in this translated manuscript called radical compassion, and that kind of becomes entangled with the outside world. I think I was interested also putting kind of different forms of technology, just having like handwritten translation next to AI AI coding, and I think both in AI coding and also in this translation involves this process of decoding, and also there's a level of kind of consciousness of kind of resurrecting something, and this question of like what makes up the, what kind of particles of yourself do you kind of also imbue into something else? For example, training an AI model, you're using specific data to train it, and this also has your hand in it, and also specifically for translation, it still has a kind of fragments or kind of this aftermath of you, because you take the text in and you bring it out of yourself. So I was kind of interested in those different processes. So I'm going to just read from some parts of the kind of the AI project. It was interesting because this book came right before ChatGPT came out. So, and there's a language model in this book. And I was on a AI panel, and ChatGPT, the questions were generated by ChatGPT. So it was interesting. Like, some of the questions were not related to this book at all, but then I was like, maybe that's like a future book, or that's like, it's predicting the future. So the outside manuscript in the future, it's in the second person. And here, I'm talking about a self-driving car accident. Rosalind looks it up, the accident. The first article refers to it as the trolley, aka self-driving car problem. On a detour, a self-driving car meets another self-driving car in what seems to be an inevitable fatal accident. In one car, 58-year-old Mr. Ahmed with early hearing loss and a heart murmur, and Mrs. Ahmed, 51 and diabetic. In the other, 34-year-old Mrs. Lockwood and her 3-year-old toddler. The manufacturer, Solintel, said the cars exchanged data and attempted to make the best decision. Medical histories and demographic information were included. Pakistani, Muslim, heart condition, diabetic, Caucasian, Christian, baby eczema, and so on. The company involuntarily confessed these details through a leak. In the past year, there had been a number of accidents with similar results, and the CEO of Solintel responded that race, age, wealth, and religion had in no way impacted the decision-making process of the cars. These were tragedies, simple as that. The comments at the end go on for pages. Baby plus mom is greater than 2 old people. What's the problem? Our cars work just like our drones work, with minimal casualties. Would a non-white baby have lived? AI is God. Rosalind closes her eyes like she was overloaded, but then she begins whispering. I remember them, Mr. and Mrs. Ahmed, and that girl Sal down the street, who you used to hang out with when you were a kid. She made those weird collages with like hair strands and nail clippings. Rosalind looks at you, momentarily satisfied at her memory retrieval capabilities. But then the news sinks into her, and she's wiping her eyes, saying it's the saddest thing she's heard. And you're not sure why she's getting sentimental about people she's seen only twice in her whole life. But she's staring at you, waiting for your face to respond. And you remember the time many years ago when you visited her family out in that lonely stretch of Pennsylvania, and the 4 of you went out to dinner, and outside the restaurant she spotted a mangy 3-legged dog that was clearly abandoned, and she wanted to help it, but no one would listen, and throughout dinner she kept talking about this ashy dog that no one cared about, and her food went cold, and she refused to eat, and later you heard the sad rumbling of her stomach as she slept, and you can still sometimes hear it if you listen closely. And then, and this section is, in this character's, the AI programmer's office, a futurist visits the office. And this actually kind of happened in when I worked in this tech job, a futurist came and visited it. I didn't know futurists exist, a futurist from IBM, but I guess, there's historians, so I guess futurists, possibility. A futurist visits the office for a general assembly. He asks everyone to fill out a virtual questionnaire about their expectations for the future. Rate your satisfaction with the present, 3 out of 5. How do you rate the amenities at your home? 3 out of 5. Would you want to move away from New York City? Undecided. Do you think the future will be better than the present? Okay. What is your level of excitement for the future? Enough. Brianna peeps over to stare at your answers and says you sound dispassionate about everything. Being unbiased is good, no, you say? She shrugs and blots her face with an oil cleansing wipe. She hands one to you, and you proceed to squeeze your pores until your face is a desert landscape. Your cellular memories sopped up in the cloth. The futurist is a bald man who wears a pinstriped suit of a salesman. Brianna tells you he looks like her husband, and you squint, trying to remember the picture at her desk of him and their sons, but they come out looking like blobs. The man is named Luke, not after the Jedi, he clarifies for the audience. Some people don't get it. Petrov laughs his face into a beat. Luke projects images of New York City, standard photos of a subway station at midnight and Central Park at the height of summer with hydrants flooding the streets and kids jumping rope, their shadows butterflying across the asphalt. Images of a young woman hanging her legs outside a fire escape and waving at the camera, then shots of her messy bedroom. A plant dying in the corner of the room. It all makes you slightly nostalgic for a past you didn't have. Luke asks the audience to close their eyes, and then he commands everyone to awaken to a better New York City. The streets are brighter, with a silicone-like shine. Houseless people have disappeared. The subways look sleek and efficient, everything more streamlined, especially homes. You stare at an image of a teenage girl smiling in her techie room, chatting through a chip in her index finger. The housebot has prepared her coffee and breakfast. Her blinds open precisely at 7 in the morning. On a mobile ready press stand, a school outfit hangs, freshly steamed, courtesy of the housebot. Can you now imagine the future, Luke says, and waits for the slow, stomach-rumbling midday applause. Azizi stands up, raising a hand. Whose future is this? I can't imagine this girl's room in my village. Please label it properly as a Western future, not for everyone. Half the crowd has already snuck out of the room. Luke projects his business card on the wall. Underneath his title is a quote, "We had the Internet of Things. Next will be the Internet of Beings." You thank Luke telepathically and tell him not to join the dark side. I'm just gonna, I know, yeah. And so this character is working on an AI project that she doesn't completely know what it's going to be used for. And I feel like often the case in these corporations, you just don't know what the project will be used for, or you're working on a very specific section of it. So I was kind of interested in exploring that. And also in this book, there's a reality TV show about soldiers, and that's also an integral part of this narrative. So I think it was kind of part of this book. We're trying to figure out how all these pieces come together. 39, okay. So this, yeah. So yes, so this a bit related to the reality show about soldiers that they're watching throughout the story. On your way to work, you pass a man in a wheelchair who carries a sign around his neck. Support a veteran. He says loudly that he was stationed in Ottawa. He pats his ribs as if this imagined city is located somewhere inside him. He shows you his arthritic fingers and silicone knees. His legs don't work. He says his liver is engorged, lungs embossed with tumors, but his kidneys are perfectly shaped. With these final words, a sprinkle of spit wets your arm. Sorry, you say, and walk straight into the deli, holding the door for the next entering customer. You don't touch the spot on your left arm, the flecks of liquid still visible. The bathroom is out of order, and as you pick up items for lunch, you are oddly aware of the weight of that arm, as if it's an extension of the man sitting outside, who you recall most clearly through the outline of his injuries. He talked to you and everyone at once, and you avoided staring, out of politeness, you think, the nakedness of his need on that crowded street, the discomfort in your glands as you walked even closer to him, tossed an apology which he might not have even heard. That was more for your sake than his. At the register, the woman in front of you doesn't have an ID, so the clerk scans her eyes, and she winces slightly. You rub your own, remembering the prick of the red light, the momentary dizziness. You haven't felt it in a few years, because you make sure not to forget your ID. When it's your turn, it's gone. So in this book, there's also this carbon score monitoring system that's kind of collecting data. So a lot of the book is kind of dealing with how AI is trained on our kind of collective consciousness, which is just pieces of our own data that's sprinkled around. Yeah, I think I'm gonna just read like 2 more short sections. Whenever you have a new project at work, you name it. Usually the name comes quite naturally. You'll hear a word in passing, or while reading the news, something will catch your attention. It's a ritual you started from your first day and provides, you think, a physical anchoring to an assignment. Today, you scan a story about a man living on a houseboat on the Hudson in preparation for the city turning into Atlantis. For your lunch hour, you slip off your shoes, sit cross-legged in your chair, and eat a spicy eggplant sandwich. You're in a partial state of meditation, closing your eyes, chewing, and waiting for the perfect word to drop in. And from this emptiness, a voice asks, "Do you mind if I join you?" It's Ricky, his hand already pulling over a chair. He brought with him a greasy slice of pizza he must have picked up outside the building. "I can't seem to prepare myself for the future," he says, and takes a bite. His skin is slightly pale and erased. Because he doesn't look well, you momentarily forget yourself, the self-consciousness you normally would have felt by the intrusion. You hand over the commiseration chocolate, gifted from one of your coworkers, and he eats it right away, telling you it has raw floral undertones like bee vomit. Nearby, you sense Brianna watching the 2 of you, tucking away this information for safekeeping. She once mentioned the bareness of Ricky's desk. No pictures or extraneous things, and then his overt disregard for his colleagues, the failure to engage in normal human chatter like, "Hello, how are you? Your hair is wet. Did it rain? The weather is unpredictable. Let's talk about what's outside of us because we can't talk about what's inside." She shook her head. "I wouldn't trust him. He's not planning to stick around long." Ricky tells you about his past gig. He trained a specialized AI program at a research hospital to analyze images from medical scans to identify malignant cells. It wasn't so hard to mislead, he admits. A slight alteration of an image led to dramatically different results. The real difference between machine error and human error, he says, is that no one gets in trouble when AI makes a mistake. The image of Mr. and Mrs. Ahmed blinks in your mind, and you resume eating your sandwich. The vegetables taste charred and rubbery. Lately, you've heard more jokes about the meaning of AI, appearing intelligent, artfully idiotic, archangel incarnate, usually followed by a tentative knowing gasp of laughter as if renaming something made it more manageable. How else to survive the great invisible forces pulling everyone closer into this claw of convenience and efficiency? You pause and stare at your half-eaten sandwich. Ricky touches your arm, maybe sensing your thoughts. He points at the news article you pulled up and tells you he wouldn't mind living on Atlantis because he likes swimming. You shake your head and tell him you are looking for a name. And this must intrigue him because he nods like he understands. And you go on to explain the new assignment without giving away too many details, except calling it strange and alarming. He leans back, thrumming his fingers against his chin as you wait in anticipation. "Ah," he says, and pauses for a suspense. "How about bogey?" Bogey, like the boogeyman. I think every culture has a variation of that childhood monster. You test the word out loud, and it morphs on your tongue into booger, sounding somewhat childish, disgusting, and cute. "It has a ring to it," you say, and he nods, summoning the creature with 3 incantations. Boogie, boogie, boogie. The name doesn't change anything, but somehow it makes you feel better. Maybe, yeah, I think maybe we'll stop there. Stop there this time. Okay, maybe one last section, I guess. I'm trying to forget what time we started. Okay, it's hard because there's all these different threads. So you're just like, how do I make something that sounds coherent in a way? Okay, this is also the same about training the AI model. On your desk, you find accessories from Intravan, stress balls that change colors when squeezed. The company motto stitched across the circumference, vanguards of innovation. There are also t-shirts with a matching logo. The only person wearing the t-shirt is Petrov. You begin like you normally do, stemming and chunking the data. You start off with children's books with simple grammar patterns like girl feeds duck and mom smiles at child. You're no longer agitated by the fact that an epoch of training runs so quickly you can't even blink before it's done. Petrov called it unique for a reason, and maybe this is the reason. Bogey's a voracious eater. Its neural networks can be trained for both speech and visual capabilities. In the bathroom, you record yourself singing a lullaby and upload it along with an archive of nursery rhymes. To teach it to see the world, you start feeding the tagged visual images from the training archives, everything from a box to a tree. In the test environment, you analyze some results. It has identified a chair as a dog and a trunk as a whale, and the latter you partly understand. By lunch, when Ricky shows up, you're exhausted. How's our monster doing? Delightfully bad. That's the most we can hope for. He combs his hair with his fingers. Near the back of his neck sprouts a spider-shaped birthmark. When he asks you to go for a drink after work, you stare at it like it's a sign. Okay, I'm just going to read one last section about intelligence. Intelligence is not consciousness. Once upon a time, there lived an AI that was trained to complete on a trivia game. It was fed dictionaries, novels, Bibles, anything humanly essential, and it regurgitated so well without understanding that it was given the top prize as the most intelligent being in the world. Bogey would easily eat up that AI. Today, you run a sentiment analysis in the test environment. From the results, it can identify happiness and sadness with a high probability of success, but then when you test for words and images associated with danger, you discover it has marked an infant with a high threat level, along with several countries. Throughout the day, Bogey makes the same choices, and you're tired, and Bogey is still hungry and bad. In truth, there is no clean data. Everything on this planet is rotting. I'll end there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Akil. It's now my pleasure to introduce visual artist Baseera Khan. Baseera is a New York-based performance, sculpture, and installation artist interested in materials, color, and their economies, the effects of these relationships to labor and family structures, religion, and spiritual well-being. Most recently, from June 2023 until this past summer, Khan's public art commission, Painful Arc, Shoulder High, was on view at New York City's High Line Park. For their first solo museum exhibition at the Brooklyn Museum in 2021-2022, Baseera Khan used their own body as an archive, often employing a variety of multimedia collage techniques to visualize the lived experiences of people at the intersections of Muslim and American identities, both today and throughout history. In his review of their exhibition in Frieze magazine, Aruna D'Souza wrote, "There are few artists as materially inventive as Baseera Khan." Baseera has exhibited in numerous locations, including the Wexner Center for the Arts, the New Orleans Museum of Art, Munich Documentation Center for History of National Socialism, and Sculpture Center in New York. Their performance work has premiered at the Brooklyn Museum of Art, Whitney Museum of Art, and Art Pop Montreal International Music Festival. They have completed residencies at the Kitchen NYC, Pioneer Works, and the Abrams Art Center, among other locations, and they are a 2024 graduate of the Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture. Baseera Khan is the winner of the Artist Prize for the MTV Smithsonian Channel TV docuseries The Exhibit, and a recipient of the 2020 UOVO Art Prize, the Brick Colleen Brown Art Prize, the 2019 Joan Mitchell Painters and Sculptors Grant, and the 2018 Niska Naifa Grant. Their works are part of several public permanent collections, including the Solomon Guggenheim, Whitney Museum of American Art, Brooklyn Museum of Art, the Walker Art Center, and the New Orleans Museum of Art. Khan received an MFA from Cornell University and a BFA from the University of North Texas. And I'll end by sharing what a few words that Baseera had to say on their work. I make work to discuss materials and their economies, the effects of these relationships to labor and family structures, religion, or spirituality, to reveal the intersections of power and culture. In my opinion, material creates identity, not the other way around. The pressure of identity is too much and too constructed, so I try not to reinstate these colonial labels in my work. Instead, try to emancipate them by my use of form and color, performance. I abstract identity with multiple ways of working. My life's work is dedicated to the development of my own legacy on my own terms with the use of architecture, fashion, painting, photography, textiles, and music, parody, sculpture, and performance. I manifest my femme, native-born Muslim American experience. Baseera, we're so thrilled and lucky to have you tonight and to share and talk about your remarkable work. Thank you for coming. The floor is yours.
Hi, everybody. So, who all is going to be a spooky bear? I want to be a spooky bear. A few things. Thank you so much for inviting me to your community, and you make me sound really cool. So, thank you for that. But also, like, this is very cool. This is like sound insulation material. And it also looks like the shillings that you see on a roof. And I think that's just brilliant. And you're going to find out why I think that's brilliant. Okay. Anyway, let's get started, because I'm going to put you through a journey of 160 slides. No. Let's see. Okay. I do want this to be like this. Okay. Okay, so how many of you have visited the Highline Park? And how many of you saw my work on the Highline? It's okay. This is not an interrogation. Okay. So this work was installed in 2022 to 2023, and actually 2023 to 2024, and it was under the Standard Hotel, which in and of itself is an archway. So we want to thank the Standard Hotel for that. Anyway, I'm just going to show you some images of the Highline and then get into it. So this is kind of what you approach it. It looks like stone. You want, if it's raining outside, this is not the place that you're going to want to stand because it's empty on the top. I'm really interested in props in terms of architecture because it sort of, in my own opinion, displays kind of like the propness of power. And I oftentimes think that a lot of these architectural features that you see in public spaces are there to train us unconsciously on how to act and behave in public spaces. So you can see that there's a lot of like graffiti-like scratch marks on this particular stone. But really what I was thinking about is how archways and gateways in public spaces are reveries of colonial histories and ownership. This is in Paris. And you can see that there's ornamentation, there's a sense of leadership and guidance, and it tells you how to approach the city. But oftentimes, it's a place where people come to air out their grievances. So on one hand, it is a place of reverence and ownership of many, many people who came together to make the city. So it's celebrating those people. But it's also a place that perhaps has dark histories. There are a lot of city center areas in New York City specific, that were actually burial grounds for Native and recently freed African slaves. Washington Square Park is one of them. So I kind of over time, both living in Denton, Texas, which the city center where I got my first booster shot, also had a black and white drinking fountain, even up until when I left in 2004. So, I mean, and it's still there. So, that being said, you know, I when I was thinking about some of these projects that were coming up, I wanted to unpack these monuments and kind of think about what a current monument would look like. And I think that in and around the moment of Occupy Wall Street and the Black Uprisings, there was a lot of manifestation of that, and a lot of really important structures were taken down. But I do remember the structure that was taken down during the Iraq War. I wish I had put that slide in here, but I don't know if you remember, but when the Saddam Hussein sculpture, whatever that thing is called, was taken down, right? So these things are milling in my head, you know. I'm from the South, and there's a lot of monuments in Texas. Then I come to New York, 2007, with 2 duffel bags and a ticket to Daft Punk. And I'm in Coney Island, you know? So anyway, I'm just painting the scene of me, like, seeing structures, you know? Like, I didn't really grow up around fine art, but I grew up around fine buildings. The Dallas-Fort Worth area has more kind of students of Walter Gropius in its kind of circumference than I think anywhere in the world. You know, like Louis Kahn and, you know, Richard Meyer and all of the kids. You know, Renzo Piano, Hershon Demiron. Every single minute, there's a huge building opening up. There are museums. I saw like a Richard Serra get care flighted into the Nasher Sculpture Garden and the Modern in Fort Worth. So that's what I was seeing growing up, and I didn't see much of this. You know, I didn't see the other side of it. I didn't see the side where it's actually also a place where people come to like figure something out as a collective self. So all that to say is this is the segue image. This is like one of the first times I came to New York City. And I was a bit obsessed with Jean-Claude and Christo, just a bit. But I was also obsessed with David and Albert Maysles. Do you guys know who that is? Yeah. Did he do a residency here? They would have loved it here. It's not the East Hamptons, but. So this is kind of like a reimagination of a gateway. And it's so different, right? It has a different feel. So I decided to make my own gateway when I had the chance. It takes a village to make artwork. It really does. So on some level, I can't even have full ownership of my practice. But I had a group of people encourage me to do a touring show, and I was able to make this first gateway sculpture in the Moody Art Center in Houston, and it then traveled to Cincinnati. And the building was a Zaha Hadid building. Okay, so when I was presented with this opportunity, the last thing I wanted to do was hang something on the walls. So that was also an implication of, it's time, let me make this gateway. So you can see how it's constructed. It's kind of a honeycomb. You then take the tablets and you snap them onto the sides, and it's very theatrical. Like, this is not going to shelter anybody. And it's made out of foam. So when you actually go up close to it, you may or may not understand that it's maybe 1/10 of the weight of what it's supposed to. So I like to play with size, as many of you in here do too, I'm sure. So, you know, this is kind of what I was thinking. I was like, maybe I should inscribe the gateway with my own facsimile of self and identity. There has been a climbing practice that I've been doing for a while called Braid Rage, and then I've been thinking about radical ornamentation. So it's almost like these little ships that are like launching me up onto this platform. And this was sort of the beginning stages of me being like, I'm going to inscribe a gateway with my own heritage. So what is that? That's like a bunch of boxes in a garage. So this was like the initial stage of me thinking about the Highline sculpture. Despite what Theory said about my bio, I didn't go to Skowhegan in 2024, but I would, because that place is very cool. I went in 2014. Okay, so in 2012, I graduated from Cornell University, and I don't know if you've ever gone to grad school, but it really, it's like, it's not enough to pay for grad school. You also have to pay for the therapy that happens after grad school. So anyway, I spent a lot of time at home, and I was working on a waffle truck. Yes, I did go to an Ivy League school. But, you know, in between, I kind of just decided, you know, my dad's not feeling well. He's getting sick. Why don't I just kind of go home and forget the art world? So then I actually realized, like, there are all these people who are migrant workers or students in Denton, Texas, that would get deported, not necessarily forever, but sometimes they'd have to leave the country for 3 days or 3 weeks and come back. So what do you do when you get a letter saying you gotta go? So I started seeing little suburb houses across Denton, Texas, which is only known for fracking and weed and maybe music. But no one else would know unless you were in that genre of things. So I think that might mean that my mom was texting me and someone taught me how to turn, see? My mom's a saboteur. So anyway, getting back to the point, I started seeing under my own nose, I started seeing how global and infrastructural just my own home was. Like, you don't have to reach for this stuff. Like, each one of these boxes had the contents of people who are struggling to find a new way. This particular person from this grouping of boxes was a Palestinian woman who came to the North Texas University to study medical data technology, which is simply, she wanted to change the data in war-torn countries. They have not been changed with the UN since the 1980s. So she was given a grant to come to the university to work on a medical sociology PhD. So, you know, she was given that letter, the cute letter that says, you gotta go. You know, like, I think she was having to go for 3 weeks someplace. Go anywhere in the world, just don't be here. So I started looking at these boxes and photographing them and kind of thinking about the archive at that point, kind of thinking about it as an antiquity. You know, a Kellogg's Frosted Mini Flake is your morning delight, but for this person, it's where they kept their PhD archives or important documents, you know, this, that, and the third. So then there was the issue of me working on a waffle truck. So I didn't have the imagination or the village born yet for me to make the work I wanted to make. So I took cardboard and I made little stencils and I would paint it because I wanted to archive the idea that I wanted to carve this in stone one day. And I wanted to think about the like kind of global communication and like interpretations of like these suburban satellite cities that oftentimes bring immensely intelligent international people from all over the world to these suburb towns. But then what do? You know, 7 years, PhD, then what do you do? What do you do with your life? So, you know, bookmark. I did a photo series. It's beautiful. Then, going back to the original conversation about the High Line, when Cecilia Almani, the star that she is, came to my studio at Pioneer Works in 2018, she said, "What do you want to do?" And I tried to explain this to her, and she was like, "Cool." She disappears and then comes back in 2020 during the pandemic, takes me on a walk on the High Line and says, "Pick a place, any place." And I picked a place and she says, "Cool, I guess I'll see your project. Bye." And then she went off to be a star and curated the Venice Biennale. So didn't see her again. So I had a glass of Brut before I came on stage. Okay, so what are these boxes? These are all of the things, all the supplies that come into the High Line to make it great. There's another layer to the High Line. Every gentrifying city, not neighborhood, but every gentrifying city in America wants their own High Line right now. So if it's Miami, they want the Low Line. If it's Boston, I think there was also a project, I don't know, in Boston. Now, the Greenway. Thank you. So I started talking with the department heads, like whether it's horticulture, whether it's hospitality, whether it was the art department, the custodial department, you know? And I started taking photos of the boxes and paying attention to the way that people would write notes on them and got to know them for a while. And I didn't know what to do. I was gonna make a photo series? Was I gonna make banners? I don't know what I was thinking. So then one day I was messing around and made a collage. And like I said before, I'm really into Jean-Claude and Christo. So I do a lot of drawing and like manifesting on paper or however I can in my studio. And some of those projects just may never happen. Or maybe they will, you know, one day. So from there, and the blue is kind of the size of an average person. I think I'm an average person. I'm not short, actually. So, you know, now these images are about just like the work day, okay? So this is what we wanted to do. How do we do it? How do we assemble the team? This is a day in the life of Baseera Khan. Like, not very spectacular. You can see my hair was really short and now it's really long, so you can see the time passing. And, you know, there's distinct ways in which some of the material and resources come in, so I wanted to honor that. And then here we are. In 2023, we're installing the work. It's very similar to the first gateway, working with a team. And along the way, just like with Jean-Claude and Christo, I made little like sample pieces. So I used the Corian and granite to make these particular plates so that people could enjoy them and also be patrons of the project. And this was right at the time when I was like, you know, I think I need to go back to painting. I mean, it was just I studied painting in school a long time ago. Then I went on this journey of performance and sculpture. And this was really a moment where I was like, okay, I'm going back to painting. And it's not necessarily strange to see acrylic paint on marble, granite, or in this case, corian. It's an old-fashioned way of thinking about the substrate because, you know, the old-fashioned Italians wanted to cover their beautiful buildings that made out of marble. But then during like certain colonial eras, they wanted to wash away all the color and reveal the sterile, you know, veins of the marble slabs. So there's a lot of thinking that goes on for me particularly with the project that is still to come, you know? Okay, take a deep breath. So this is a project called Laws of Antiquity that all of these objects that I'm going to share with you come from the Brooklyn Museum library and object hood. Their collection? Yes, not their safe. So we'll just take a couple of look at the images. These are all photographs that were done in performance in the bellow of the museum. So I was not allowed to obviously take these objects out of the museum, but I was able to work with them with a conservator. And this is the studio with my conservator. I made her custom nitrile gloves because the whole idea of Laws of Antiquity was I wanted to think about the performativity of safety. And of course, we're not talking about the body necessarily, but we're thinking about these objects, which could be applied to national parks, but then could also be applied to ownership, which can also be applied to public space and how we interact or how we're taught to interact in public space. This is not a comb. This is a rug maker brush thing. And one thing to think about is, like, there's a list of rules of the way in which this object will be safe. And in this particular moment, it had to have a nitrile glove and it had to sit like this. There's no other way it would have been released. So actually, I was asked to not reveal these images. I mean, I can probably do it now, but at the time, there was a lot of safety issues around lawsuits as well, because the patrons of these works would maybe get upset if they saw the conservator hold it a weird way, right? So we have that too. In a performance like this, where I'm trying to make a relationship between the heritage of my hair and this object that makes rugs, oriental rugs, this is kind of like the nature of what the work ends up looking like. And luckily enough, I'll get to do a new law. Denied. What do? There's this whole team waiting for me, and I don't know what to do now. So I had someone run to actually get the slide printed large. So in a way, the slide and the documentation was as much of an antiquity and an object for me as the artwork itself, and I was able to keep it moving. So this is just me. I don't know why this slide is here. I was just thinking about drawing and draft making, but this is what it ends up looking like. And the titles are really, it's like very matter of fact, like pricket, stand, base, shaft, and tray pink. You know, like I'm not very creative when it comes to titles. That's the neoprene glove. And in this one, they promised I could touch it, but then they said I couldn't touch it, but then I could put my iPhone under it. So in my opinion, my rule, personal rule of wanting to touch the Pricket stand, I then was able to touch it with light. So I was kind of happy with that. I couldn't wear this head object because the enamel was falling off from the point of when it was emerging from the dark to the light, because a lot of these objects haven't even been seen. So something that was greenlit became censored because it was breaking apart in the moment. So we had to put it on the ground, and then I went and got the copies made again. And I kind of created, I was upset. So I thought I'd just make really big earrings. This did not make the cut. You know, this is a moment in the Brooklyn Museum when all is done and farewell, right? And opening night, this is what it ends up looking like. And you know, this isn't Photoshop. These are objects, you know? So yes, they're flat, but yes, they're objects. Okay. So, you know, that was something that I was commissioned to do during the Brooklyn Museum, and Sharon wanted me to share a little bit about the Brooklyn Museum show that opened in October 2021. This was the space I was given, and it was a lot of space. Like, it was like about almost 7,000 square feet, because I was also given this kind of side space. So it was a lot for me to handle, but I did it, of course. And that's really cute, right? Oh my God, Obama's. Okay, we're gonna be fine. So I hope. Okay, so, you know, look, you're asking somebody who hasn't done a lot. I mean, I've done some things, but I haven't done a lot, and you're asking me to put 3 rooms together around Judy Chicago, you know? So it was a little bit, it's intimidating to see, she's intimidating. She's very intimidating. So these are Judy Chicago's work. So, you know, I was just like thinking about this kind of like way in which works are put together in like archival ways, and the way that artists are like kind of scooched in with archival objects. So so I wanted to scooch my work into the space as well. And this is the hall that led into the side rooms. There's a music element, so this chest comes out, and then there's music that sits inside of it. So for this particular exhibition, we just let the album play without it coming from the chest. And I do have one song that I can play while I show you these images. So, you know, those of you who went dutifully to the show at Brooklyn Museum that was up for a year will find this music familiar. So these objects are based in Islamic geometry and patterning that my mother has collected over many, many years, and in fact, many women in her family that precede her have collected. So on some level, it's like a kind of document in visual form of female empowerment. I mean, it's the feminist art center at the Brooklyn Museum, and Lorraine O'Grady had just had a show right before me. So yeah, there's that. But I think about them as disco balls, and I do come from a little bit of like club kid history. There wasn't a lot to do in Denton, Texas, so there was a lot of music. and there was a lot of drugs. But I was kind of a control freak like Frank Zappa, so everyone was doing drugs but me, because I was the chaperone, and I drove everyone home safe. So this is the draft for the bust. And the music albums, they go along with the busts. Looking at antiquities, deities, and then forming myself against those antiquities. That's my mom. And that's my hair. Yeah. It comes out and it turns into a paintbrush. This is a really important slide because enough nostalgia. So this is a really important document because it's kind of the way I understand the symbolic idea of the object itself, the deity itself, like the ornamentation, the jewelry, and the bust, and the curve, and the look, and the stance, and the posture. They all mean something. So I kind of pieced them apart and put my own lived experience in it. So for example, like my headphones give me power, my Dior lip plumping lipstick gives me power, like my tabbies give me power. So, there's a lot. My cat, that's my cat, she gives me power. So it was kind of a way for me to reestablish these deities in my own form. I'm using 3D printing tools and body scanning, because a big kind of thorough line in my practice is I think that desire and surveillance, they have the same effects. They use the same technology, and there's a lot that mirrors itself. It's almost like the haves and have-nots, or the yin and the yang, or it's like it's a binary you can't separate. So for me, looking at this particular body of work, it really shows like desire in the body. Like Mike Tyson had scanned his body the week before I went in to scan mine. So like athletes have to have a desirable body, right? So am I an athlete? This image is a failed project. The new museum asked me to send them a document that took me a very long time, and I'm glad that I did it because that's how I made this work that is now at the Portland Museum of Art. But the person that won this award for the new museum, new building, for the new museum, the director, by the way, is Cecilia's husband. Just a note. This artwork did not win out of the 5 contestants, but Sarah Lucas did, and I'm a big fan. So the fact that Sarah Lucas is going to have this amazing public art sculpture on the Bowery, for me, is a win. So there's that. But this is fake. This is AI. How am I doing on time? 5 minutes. I can do that. You mentioned that I was on a TV show, MTV stuff, which was on some level embarrassing, but on another level it was fun. So this is actually a Smithsonian collection, Narrow Dockany, and this is what I unpacked on the TV show. and I was able to show it at the Hirshhorn because I won the TV show. But you can still binge watch it on Amazon Prime. And lastly, I'll leave you with a kind of necessary adjustment in my studio practice where all the materials from plastics to petroleum to large scale to small scale to fabrication ends up in a bag, in a water bag that I bought at temu.com. There is crude oil and India ink and water in these bags, and they are sculptures. So on some level, my identity fits in a bag. This is me. And alongside that, I started using oil paints, petroleum, crude oil, and ink to make these new works that I showed last spring. So I'm taking flora and fauna that you see in other works that I've made, like, for example, on the High Line, when you saw that, not the High Line, but the first gateway, you saw the ornamentation. I'm really thinking a lot about Kashmir, and I'm thinking about the flora and fauna that are there, and its nativity and its extinction, and the way that a lot of the material is extracted over time and put into luxury items, or it's a constant extraction to where, if if the farmers are extracting saffron from a crocus, they can't necessarily afford the finest material, so they're sold back fake material to use in their customs. And I was a big fan of Yinka Shonobera when I was growing up, and I think that artist did a lot of work about circulation and fakes in a similar way. So, whether I'm looking at crocuses or poppies or lilies, I'm thinking about its nativity extraction, but also art history, because there are so many really important artists that have been painting these works, these flowers. The flowers are the work of art, right? The way in which these really important flowers live in museum spaces and are revered by these really important artists like George O'Keeffe or Van Gogh. So making new work for London, and I'm thinking about particularly crocuses, and yes, these images are meh, and I'm working on it, but thinking about crocuses and looking at really important works of art, for example, Van Gogh's crocuses, works of art that I see at the Met Museum. This is just for scale to show you some works that I've done, or water lilies and Monet. And I can't tell you that I'm smart enough to have made that connection until a couple of years later, when I was like, oh, there's something here. So, that's it. That's it.
I have time travel whiplash tonight. We've been to the future, we've been to the past, we've been to the present. So everybody just take a deep breath and let our incredible visiting artists gather themselves as well. We have time for a couple of questions from the audience, but I'm going to get us rolling. Akil, I was so moved by the scene when the futurist comes to meet with everyone and ask questions, and I've been kind of thinking about this time that we're in. And I was curious to hear from both of you, are those the right questions we should be asking? Like in this moment, what are the questions you hope people are asking either about the future or the past? Baseera, you deal so deeply with antiquities and history and legacy. What do you wish we were asking right now?
What I wish people to ask is why at the end of every horrific human activity, there's a lot of beautiful human activity, but at the center of every not so right to horrible thing that humans are capable of doing, there's always this weird sense of ownership and land grabbing. Whether it's electromagnet grabbing, because that's how we have the internet, or water, or crude oil, or air, I feel like that is what we need to start asking. Like, why do you buy property in Texas and not own what's under your house or above your house? You only own the house. Like, that is just the way it is. You don't own anything other than the structure. So I would like us to start asking questions about why we don't have autonomy and agency. I don't know.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just to add on that, I just think also about questions about imagining other ways of being and existing on this world, and other ways of seeing and doing things. Sometimes we think of failure as if if something doesn't actualize, that's failure, and just like kind of like the act of imagining other kinds of ways of existing, even if it doesn't if we have a different time scale of things, then that's helpful. But also just our time scale of things. Sometimes we just we can only see maybe like to our next generation. Like, how do we see kind of further than that? Maybe thinking how even seeing how other forms like plants and fungi. I was talking about AI consciousness, and I think a lot of times we forget other ways of being. Even thinking of plants, fungi, and how they kind of exist in the world. And maybe how to decenter our view in some ways, maybe as humans too, and bring other forms of being and thinking into our space.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a great transition to the next thing I was thinking about. You both kind of connect so deeply with New York in your work, and what we saw tonight. Here we think so much about community, and I'm just so curious in this moment in human history and this moment in our history as a culture, where are you both finding community right now? How are you finding community? How are you nurturing community for yourselves as artists and writers?
Yeah, I guess right now I'm living in Cambridge. There's a lot of kind of movement in where I am often. So I guess I try to find a community on different scales. So even it's just even the people I just even normally interact with on that scale, but also I think reading and engaging with other people's work in different ways. Or even I just mentioned plant and fungi consciousness. I'm in this reading group in the Divinity School about plant and fungi consciousness. So there's a lot of things about thinking about how do we even create community even with the plants and things around you. So I've been thinking about how I situate myself in that. And I think for me, no matter where I am, the project or interacting or collaborating or working with other people or reading their work, it's a way to it's kind of a grounding practice in that sense.
Oh, this question. I go to therapy on Wednesdays before I teach at Columbia University, and my therapist told me I need to start seeing him 2 days a week because he thinks that I need to find other communities. So he suggested that I start something that could be my choice of bringing people to my space. So it's funny that you asked that question. And secondly, a good friend of mine who's a writer, he said, "Do you have any hobbies?" And I said, "I like to look at the water, and I like to eat." So
You're in the right place.
and then
Welcome to
you
Provincetown.
emailed me. So this is my community right now.
Thank you for that. We got some +1s in the audience. So what questions do you all have? We have mics, I think, that we'll bring around. Who has a question for our guests? Baseera, my therapy is also on Wednesday, so we're therapy twins.
It's a good middle of the week moment.
It's a good moment. We have one in the back here. Oh, nice. If you're in the Wednesday therapy club, please raise your
Wednesday
hand.
Club.
Please join us.
My community is people who go to therapy on Wednesdays.
All right. Any questions from you? Yep.
You have a kind of photographic approach to sculpture. There's a way of turning images into objects. And I wonder if those are languages, if you're contrasting those languages in ways that maybe you didn't speak to and could speak to. And yeah, just the relationship of flat turning into round.
I was a really big fan of Alan Sekula, and I got really into the nerd wheel about photography. It was also something I had access to when I was growing up. I had like a 35 millimeter Canon camera, and I was taught how to do all the things camera related, and I think that's probably a lot of people's histories. But I feel like I always wanted more from the exposure. So I would scratch it or crumple it up or like open the closet door and get my dad all pissed that I was exposing things, or, you know, like I was always trying to have some more performativity to it. I have studied philosophy of photography quite deeply. I think it is the way we are, and I think that I personally took on this task that I need to understand what my body is in media and what it is in America, and it's always about the image. Even if, like, there's a woman named Ariella Azoulay who says, like, we live in a time period where you don't even have to take the photograph. It lives on in our mind. So I think, like, there is some kind of connection there. But it's, you know, I'm still young. I'm working on it. Thanks for the question.
Anyone else? Well, all right, then please join me in a huge round of applause for Akil Kumarasamy and Baseera Khan. So the night is not over. We have Eddie Newhouse's exhibition in the Hudson D. Walker Gallery. We have a printmaking activation in our print shop. And Fellows Open Studios. Please explore the campus, get another glass of wine. And at 8 o'clock, I believe there'll be a prize presentation in the Common Room for our postcard contest. So if you entered that, please join us back in the Common Room at 8. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy tonight.